discussing the news and making sense of a nation on the go. You're listening to The Long Form with Sunny Nayombia. This podcast is brought to you by The New Times.
Hello there. Rwanda is many things. On one hand, it is among the poorest countries in the world, and on the other hand, it is, at least to me, one of the most forward-thinking nations on the globe. Actually, when you think about it, the lack of resources perhaps creates the innovation. Let's look back at what has been done so far. Rwanda has partnered with an American startup, Zipline, to deliver life-saving drugs to rural health centers by drone. And it's also partnered with Starlink, Elon Musk's company, to provide high-speed internet to rural schools. The country, made up of citizens that earn an average of only $1,000 a year, has still found the means to launch satellites into space and found coding academies. How is this possible? What are the driving forces behind it? What are the tangible benefits? And what are the risks involved? And what does Rwanda look like, technologically speaking, the next couple of years and decades? And how does Rwanda's artificial intelligence policy fit into all of this? To answer these questions, I am joined on the long form this week by Paula Ingabire, our Minister of ICT and Innovation.
Now, if you want to react to this conversation, use the hashtag longformRW on Twitter and share your thoughts. But before we continue, do you know what you need to do today? You need to join the over 40,000 daily subscribers of the New Times e-paper to enjoy credible, in-depth reporting on Rwanda. Visit the website newtimes.co.rw to register for free. And now, back to the show.
Greetings, Paula. Thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thank you, Sunny, for having me.
I think you are the very first minister to join me. Not cabinet member, because I had the RDB CEO, former RDB CEO Claire, but you're the first ministre to join. I hope that this conversation won't be too scary and I'll end up chasing the other ministers from ever coming here.
Well, for me, that means that clearly technology and innovation are something that you are very excited about.
100%, especially in Rwanda, where we're doing so many really, really interesting things. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, just the other day, you were testing something about 5G and some kind of flying drone, something like that?
Yes, we did it with SoftBank. They are testing the use of unmanned aerial vehicles to deliver 5G connectivity. And so, because Rwanda has, positioned itself as a proof of concept hub for many of these new technologies that can be used, we have been working with SoftBank to test that. We're continuing to test. It's not final. The tests that you saw in the media recently were more the very initial tests that are being undertaken. And I think once these tests are very successful, then we'll think about what does commercialization look like, where are the places that could benefit from 5G that is delivered using drones, and how can we start to use those. So it's very exciting for us.
And it's kind of really interesting because we're doing 5G by drones, and if I'm not mistaken, I've not even seen a 5G physical mast in the country. It's what do you tech people do? No, it's leapfrogging. So
Yes.
it seems we're moving straight from 4G
Right.
to 5G by drones. Or is that actually what we're thinking about, or is it?
Well, it's going to be a combination. So I think if you followed the Mobile World Congress that just concluded this week, you may have noticed that MTN did showcase their 5G pilot that they're already doing. And in fact, before the end of this year, they will have put in place some tower infrastructure that supports 5G within Kigali. But when you see both what we are doing with the companies like MTN Rwanda and what we're doing with SoftBank, It means that we're just trying to figure out what are the different solutions and the combination of solutions that can allow us to expand 5G infrastructure across the country.
One of the things that always confuses me, and as a layperson, is, it was just only maybe a couple of years ago when we started getting into 4G, right? So you were like thinking, okay, wow, this is amazing. I can now stream, whether it's podcasts or Netflix. And now it's 5G. And I've never really understood what is 5G and why is it such a big deal?
A big deal. And soon there will be 6G. So
Jesus.
Brace yourself for the future generations of technology that are coming up. So the way these generations of technology evolve is that you're looking for better speed, better latency, and more reliability. And so that's why you start with 1G, 2G, and also the different capabilities that come with it. With 5G, the exciting bit that is coming in, let's talk about autonomous vehicles. We've seen the concept happening in most of the developed countries. We're talking about smart cities applications that require reliable and very high speed broadband connectivity. And so that is how research and development around the 5G technology evolved to enable some of those high consuming, high capacity type of use cases that also require very high reliability. Now, I like what you say about leapfrogging. Obviously, what we're also seeing in most countries, and for Rwanda, that is really also one of the things that we're really looking to do in the next 2 years, is even as we evolve to 5G and 6G and 4G, how do we shut down 2G and 3G, which, yes, have enabled some form of connectivity, but as we look at some of the ways we're using broadband connectivity for everyday life, and also being able to release some of the resources that are required to enable 4G, 5G, and 6G. So yes, it's that evolution that comes with how much high-speed, reliable broadband connectivity do we need, and that is how the different technology evolutions start to manifest.
On the sidelines, I think, of the GSMA meeting, Africa meeting that Kigali hosted last week, the government of Rwanda, as well as Airtel, announced the Connect Rwanda 2.0 initiative.
Yes.
I was also really happy to learn that the Netflix chairman, Reed Hastings, actually contributed $50 million to the initiative in order for, if I'm not mistaken, Airtel to be able to provide highly subsidized 4G smartphones, as well as connectivity at a very subsidized price. Yes. No, that's great news, right?
Very much so.
Yeah. As a Airtel user myself, the prices are so cheap now that it's mind-boggling, especially if us of an older generation, we remember what the prices were when the Jazzas and for us older people, we remember Jazza, the MTN Jazzas, and it was just so expensive.
Yes.
And now, you pay 5,000 and you have unlimited, calls and SMSs and 2 GBs per day. That's great. One of the bigger problems that we're now seeing, though, is that with more information, with more connectivity, we're having challenges. We're seeing challenges, like whether it's as media or the politicians. We're seeing problems of truth, facts, or as Donald Trump calls it, fake news. Where things are fake. Now, I can only imagine someone, say, who's always been a 2G person, so they've not really been interacting with the internet that way, the way that maybe people in Kigali have. And so this person, this new smartphone, courtesy of the Connect initiative, then they open Twitter for the first time, or they start going onto YouTube, and then they start hearing all sorts of things. How will this new group of people who've never accessed internet that way, how will they be able to understand that not everything that you read online is real, and how to discern what is real from the fake? Pretty much what I'm asking is, as a ministry, even as a government, because I'm sure you talk to your counterparts in education and local government, what are your plans to educate people on, I guess, tech literacy / media literacy, so that you're not, giving people a gift on one side, but then also giving, I guess, what we'd call a poison pill on the other side.
Right. No, Sunny, you ask a very relevant question, especially in this age and obviously at a time where for us we've been looking at the usage gap that we have in the country. I think we're one of the very first countries that really invested heavily in ensuring that you have broadband connectivity across the country, and then digitizing services and making sure that people can find services online, find information online in a much more easier manner. What we were seeing over time was that even with those investments, there was still a huge dependence on a third party provider. In this case for Rwanda, in the rural communities, it was agents. And it's still a good idea, because the reason the agent network was formed was to close that gap, because it didn't make sense to digitize services, provide broadband connectivity, and people still have to walk miles to a local government office to get a service, for example. And so in creating a wide agent network across the country, not only are we creating opportunities for employment, but we are also bridging that access gap that was there primarily because not all citizens had a basic tool like a smartphone in their hands. When Connect Rwanda started, the initial idea was, can we create awareness around the need for smartphones? Because to us, it seemed like a smartphone may be perceived as a luxury. I mean, if you can afford to have a feature phone and still do mobile money transactions and still make phone calls and SMS, it almost felt like that's good enough. And so there was no incentive, especially to move towards these smartphone devices. And so we said, let's create awareness, because we know that there are people that can afford, but maybe they've just been too comfortable with these feature phones. But also let's use their awareness to understand what are the barriers to smartphone adoption, what are the barriers to this usage gap that we're seeing. The more infrastructure rollout and investments we make, the more the usage gap widens. And that was an anomaly for us in many ways. And so when we started it off, what came out very clearly, and we're seeing it even globally, the two main barriers were affordability for the device and affordability for the services. To your point around, it was too expensive. The second one, which is what you're alluding to in your question, is digital literacy. So the absence of digital literacy skills and the absence of a device just meant that, we'll never be able to see the adoption rates going higher. All we do is we're just having to expand on the agent network. But we also very much recognize that as we put everything online, as we get more sophisticated with technology, so do cyber threats. And so the more there is a huge reliance on a third party from an individual, it also means they're exposing a lot of their personal information to just get a basic service, which is a basic right for a citizen. And so that's why for us it became very urgent to sort of fix the affordability issues that come with ensuring that the usage adoption can grow, but also the digital literacy. Now, what have we done on digital literacy? And I'll share a few things. I'm sure you've already heard about the digital ambassadors program that we had. In the beginning, we had about 100 of them, but 100 digital ambassadors for a 13 plus million population is like a drop in the ocean. You can imagine if I'm a digital ambassador and I'm going to go door-to-door training, for every one digital ambassador, they probably have more than 1 million people that they would have to target, but how long is it going to take them to come back to the very first person that they train? So it takes years to do that. And so what was important for us was, how do we scale the numbers? In the last 6 months, we've moved from 100 to 1,500 digital ambassadors across the country. And in the next 6 months, we're going to grow the number to 5,000. Our ambition is that at the village level, we are able to have at least one digital ambassador who then is able to train citizens on the basic digital literacy skills that allow them to really benefit from using and understanding the internet, but also the risks that come with what are you seeing online? How do you discern between what is right and wrong? And I'm going to come to that, because there are other measures beyond just training citizens on that, but at least we need to even be able to train them to know where to go to find the right information. But to do that, again, this is why the smartphone became very evident for us, was because we realized that if I come, Sunny, and you're one of the citizens that I'm training on digital literacy, and I train you on how to get on a smartphone to access Irembo services, and I go, even if I train you for a week and I leave, without that tool, that training is going to waste. Because tomorrow, when you need a service, you won't be able to do it yourself. Yeah. That's why we launched Byikorere campaign. It was literally, let's teach you how to do it yourself, but you can't do it yourself because you don't have the basic device. So in the end, what happens is that even if you were trained, you're still going to go to either the internet or cyber cafe or to the agent to get that service. And so it was clear that digital literacy had to go hand in hand with device ownership, because without that, then it's almost like you're, pouring into a bottomless pit and you're not seeing the results, because it's not a very coordinated approach to how we build literacy. Now, I want to focus on the question after giving you that background, which is really around, in the end, we want to make sure that institutions, whether it's government institutions, whether it's corporates, whether whether it's individuals, how do we make sure that we are putting the right information online? So today, if you may have noticed in the past few months where with the Ministry of Agriculture, there was somebody who was putting out information around some subsidy program where you had to pay a certain amount of money to get some grants or whatever it is. If I was a farmer and I saw that and got excited, my first reaction should be, can I check on the Ministry of Agriculture's website? Because information, if it's not there, then it should be a question mark of how legitimate is this. But also it has to be matched with the Ministry of Agriculture being able to say, we're seeing all of this information going out. There's fake news going around. Let's put out a statement so that whoever comes to whatever platforms we have already can see that we've communicated, that it's real or it's not real. That builds citizen confidence and trust. And so what that means is that beyond training citizens, even us as government institutions, or even for corporate companies, how do we stay in touch with what is happening and make sure that we're providing real-time information to citizens, because they're always going to refer to us when things come up and they look questionable. But if they don't find anything, they're likely to fall into a trap.
Yeah. I would like to move away from, not fully move away, but kind of move away from this topic of digital literacy and go into something a bit more complex. And that thing is AI, or artificial intelligence. So Rwanda is one of the very first countries in the world to actually have a national AI policy. We did it in, if I'm not mistaken, April this year. And we've actually instituted one even before the United States. That's kind of crazy for me. I would like to understand, why have we done it so quickly? What was our rush? It seems that, other more developed nations haven't really done that. So why us and why so quickly?
That's very interesting, Sunny, because I don't think as a country we should be playing catch up or following what everyone is doing. In the end, when there is a hype around something like AI, for example, what we do is to say, does this make sense for us as a country? The benefits that AI promises are these things that we need to do. The advantage we have, a country such as Rwanda, over some of the developed countries, which is probably maybe why they would even take longer to put in place some of these instruments, is that we don't have legacy systems and infrastructure. Whereas for most of these very developed countries may have legacy infrastructure and systems that overhauling it may take a while, but also it requires a very thought through process that sometimes it will take longer for them to adopt some of these things. Let's take an example before we come back to AI of drones. One could have asked, when we invited Zipline to come to Rwanda and use drones to help us deliver blood, they could have asked, why is Rwanda in a rush to do that? Yet most countries had not even put in place any legislation to really support drone use cases. But for us, it was not a question of no one has done it. It was a question of what is the drone technology going to help solve for, that if we're using traditional alternatives, it's going to cost us a lot, but it's also going to take so much time. For Rwanda, it was the balance between, do we go to all the 500 or health facilities, for example, and build cold room infrastructure so that we're able to store blood products and anything that requires that kind of facility, versus can we experiment with an on-demand drone service delivery option that ended up being more cost-effective, more efficient in how we're doing things. And then we work towards, okay, how do we put in place the right regulations that can support this kind of use case? And it has paid off for us in many ways. Now, AI is not any different in the way we're looking at it. We're looking at, the ability of jobs it can create. We did, together with McKinsey, we did an AI impact economic assessment to understand if we were to deploy AI solutions within the Rwandan economy, A, which are the industries that would see the most impact, and I'll come back to that. But 2, what is the potential economic impact for the country? And 3, what are the risks? So that when we are putting in place the policy, we're also thinking about the guidelines and regulations that are required so that we are able to deploy safely these AI solutions. Now, if we wait until bigger countries have implemented, again, there is the disadvantage that you probably will not be able to shape solutions in a way that serves you best. And because this is a new space, it means everyone, the level playing field, it's been leveled enough that any country, regardless of how much financing you have, how much economic power you have, you can do that. Now, there is a difference. I think where we lack as developing countries, even particularly for Rwanda, is the computing capacity. That is the infrastructure that is needed to run some of these AI applications, because it really consumes lots of data.
And power.
Exactly. Now, when you look at it, 10% of countries globally own all the computing capacity in the world. So it already means that even for us, as we venture into creating, this kind of AI policy and ecosystem, we're going to need to invest heavily in having this computing infrastructure, because that is really what powers some of these applications. Why the rush? For us, it's because we're seeing the benefits. We've already mapped out where we see we can implement AI and really get real results in a much faster manner. We've looked at healthcare, we've looked at agriculture, we've looked at public service, especially with the tax collection bit, the social security benefits, all of that. Those are different use cases that we're already looking at that we see will create a lot of potential. But another thing, the investments and partnerships we've made with universities like Carnegie Mellon, where there's a focus on data science program, AI program with even the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences, means that we've already created the talent pool that can feed into this ecosystem. And so we need to be able to provide these opportunities where they are doing the research, but also creating the products and solutions that support that. So I would even say that, honestly, there may be risks, there may be concerns. We're not, closing our eyes on that side of the equation, but we're saying let's also not miss out on being a fast mover in deploying solutions AI solutions in a safe way that still guarantees us the benefits and efficiencies that come with it.
So when you did that study with, you said McKinsey?
Yes, with McKinsey.
How much did they find out that we would stand to gain if we really go into this space?
About 6% of our GDP, which is $589 million, was the potential value of AI solutions into our economy. That would be 6% of our GDP.
How did they come up with that figure?
So we looked at a couple of use cases. So the idea was to say, where do we see the most impact of where AI can be deployed? And so, for example, for agriculture, we're looking at weather forecasting that can enable with providing real insights for farmers, even as they go through the different seasons of farming that they are undertaking. We looked at institutions like RSSB around claims management of health insurance schemes. We looked at RRA for tax collection, especially in being able to look at the submissions that have been made by people that are paying taxes and figuring out what kind of anomalies could be there. And so you're improving the tax collection system, but you're able to pick out any details where you're not collecting the taxes as should be. We looked at healthcare, and I'll come to a couple of use cases. Healthcare, from the way, you can empower our community health workers with, for example, generative AI, ChatGPT type of tools that allow them to query and have real-time information in Kenya, Rwanda, so that they're able to, and they're the frontline workers for the healthcare system. And so all of that, we're able to model, one, the jobs created, the efficiencies that will be generated from using AI solutions, and all of that came to about $600 million.
Well, in any great change, or we can call it a revolution, there's often, money that will be made, efficiencies that will be created, and opportunities. But there's always the other side of it, the collateral damage of the change. The question that I'd like to ask you is, how exactly do you see Rwanda harnessing AI without, for example, massive job losses? Is it even possible for us to enjoy what AI brings without, for example, loss of privacy or certain security risks, or even further economic inequality between the haves and the have-nots?
So let's start with the privacy bit. Again, this is where there's always complementarities to everything, that we advocate for. We wouldn't be able to put in place a national AI policy and identify different things that we're going to do if we didn't already have a data protection and privacy law. Why is that important? One, because AI is using lots of data sets, and some of the data sets include personal data. It means that if you don't have an instrument that is thinking about security and privacy, then you create a gap. And that's why for us, even in terms of sequencing, we started with the data protection and privacy law, because we wanted to put in place those instruments that were so necessary for us to ensure that the collection, the processing, the dissemination, and the storage of personal data is well taken care of. Once you have that, then that becomes one of the rails or one of the supporting infrastructure that are required to enable and support AI adoption across the economy. And that's why there's been a massive campaign going on, making sure that every institution, corporates, government institutions as well, are getting certifications as either data processors, because you're processing personal data, or data controllers if you are collecting personal data. That is important, because once you have that certification, it means that there are things that you are bound to ensuring that you respect when you are processing and collecting and storing personal data. So that's one. And then with the Data Protection Office, which is under the National Cybersecurity Authority, we've also built teams and tools that are also allowing to ensure that what we are providing for the law enforcement is actually happening with these different institutions. The question around jobs, and these are debates that you continue to see everywhere globally. Are we going to lose jobs? What does this mean? For sure, there are jobs that are going to be lost, right? But there are also those jobs that are going to be created that even have higher economic value than the ones that have already been lost. And what we are doing as a country is to say what jobs will potentially be lost. What jobs have the potential of being enhanced thanks to AI. And maybe the question shouldn't be jobs lost. I think it's what tasks get eliminated, because you could remain with your job, a certain profile of a job, but certain tasks within that job, because of AI, you no longer need human beings to execute those tasks because AI could do a better job. And where that feeds now into is, how do we revamp our education system in such a way that it's at par with the disruption that is going to come with not just AI, but other technologies, robotics, anything to do with automation that we may see. Recently, we were having a conversation around, again, it was around AI and thinking, does AI automate jobs or does AI augment jobs? And how do we go back down to the education system to figure out that we are churning out the right skills that could then live in harmony with some of these emerging technologies? And who knows? In 10 years, we could even have a new other technology that we haven't thought about today that completely changes this conversation that we're having today. When you look at our national AI policy, you realize that 70% of the policy is focused on skills. And that was very intentional because we knew without the right skills, the critical mass, and, we'll never be able to support the industry and what comes with it. But two, we know that the potential disruption that could come with certain tasks that either get augmented or automated requires that even back into the education system, the curriculum, we're really rethinking some of these things so that if you're coming out, you already know what tasks will not be relevant for a particular job profile that you have today. I think the biggest examples we've seen, whether it's lawyers or journalists, we're talking about you're writing an article, now you go to AI and do it. By the way, even in the tech sector, coding, people are starting to worry that even with coding, you may no longer need people that have to write code for weeks and months because you go to generative AI tools and they're able to churn out the code if you're able to make the right input or prompts that you're looking for. So then the question becomes, what is the human interface between what is being created with generative AI type of technology and how we are skilling people? But rather than lock ourselves in the fear of jobs will be lost or tasks will be automated and refuse to embrace that change, I'd rather we go back to the drawing board and say, how are we thinking about reskilling and upskilling for the workforce? How are we thinking about disrupting the education system so that it gives us the right skills now that can support this interface between humans and technology, so that in the end, whether we like it or not, these disruptions are bound to happen, but it's how ready we become as a society to embrace them. I don't think there's going to be maybe not in the next 5 years, but a time where we say we don't need human beings doing any tasks. But I think it's really the intersection between even the use cases that we're talking about here in our AI policy. It's always how you design technology. Can we design technology to coexist with humans? Because at the end of the day, you need that element of human traits, the empathy that comes with that in designing solutions that are going to create the much needed impact.
Right now, I've been informed that AI is being used, for example, by the Rwanda National Police,
right,
especially with its traffic cameras. They've not started using the cameras in their full capacities. Right now, they just give us traffic fines based off of, for example, speeding. But face recognition software and all those capabilities, there might be more things that those traffic cameras can do just using AI and that new tech. That's the Rwanda National Police. I'm pretty sure Minadef has found ways to protect Rwandans and through AI. But other than those two forces that really deal with security, have we used AI for more civilian use cases?
Many of them. I'll take an example. When we're going through, the very first waves of COVID, we built AI models that were able to help with detecting the potential spread of the COVID virus over time. And so that was very helpful in understanding good support through using together with MOH and the Ministry of Health and RBC, how we could use predictive analytics and AI to inform some of the COVID interventions. So there was great use of AI models in really understanding how the spread was going to happen, what interventions we needed to put in place to sort of limit the spread of COVID-19. But even in the same vein, what we've also been seeing is a lot of use case applications in the health sector. And actually, that's that's why it stands out as one. Agriculture is the highest, but health is the second one. The two are the biggest ones where we are seeing a lot of promises on how we can leverage AI models to support some of the work that the different sectors are doing. You remember the robots that we used again at the airports and the different places? All of those had an AI model that was, you talk about face recognition, they're able to detect if you have, let's say, where a group of 100 going through the airport, they're able to detect who, had some high temperature than the normal range. And so you have people that are able to follow up with you. So those were very real examples that we saw even as we're going through the COVID-19 pandemic. We have young startups that are doing some very cool things. One is Digital Muganda. What they're doing is they're building a natural language processing, model that uses Kinyarwanda. Why is that important? We talk about ChatGPT. If you query ChatGPT in English, you get a lot of insights. Try querying it with Kinyarwanda. You're probably not going to get anything. So the idea is to build our own model that is in Kinyarwanda, and we have worked with the Ministry of Health to build the solution for community health workers so that they have that kind of tool that they're able to query as they go door to door providing services, and they need to be connected with the broader healthcare system. But there are things that they can get information as soon as possible in responding to some of the cases they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And today, because of what they've been able to do for Kinyarwanda, they're now expanding the building data sets in Swahili and also Shona, so which is already a good thing. And this is a local startup that is building a ChatGPT-like model to help with translating use cases for community health workers. We have a company called Kumva Insights that has developed IoT Internet of Things sensors that can be used for crop and soil health. So you're able to know the health of crops, the health of soil, and this is a perfect use case even for agriculture as farmers try to understand what is the best crop to grow for a particular piece of land. How much fertilizers does the land or the farm need, or water and all of that. And so you need all these IoT sensors, and we're seeing startups that are actually building some of these solutions. We have a company called Hence AI. They're also based in Noshken, and what they have is they're using AI for legal case management, and so being able to recommend the best law for any particular case, and so supporting lawyers in that kind of work. So from a civilian point of view, there are very many use case applications that we're seeing, and that's why even when you ask the question why the rush, we're already seeing companies, startups that are doing that, and we wanted to be able to put in place the necessary supporting instruments that can allow them to scale. Obviously, what that also means is that if we give them a chance to succeed here in Rwanda, the challenges they're solving for all these use cases I'm sharing with you, the examples, anywhere in Africa, they would need these kind of solutions. And so that's why we are in such a hurry to create the necessary instruments. If anything, for the startups, we're not moving as fast as they wish for us to move, but that's why we create such instruments.
I was born in the early 80s, and growing up in that time, I think it was around 1989, 1990, around there. There was a movie that was released with a very famous actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, called Terminator 2, Judgment Day. The whole concept of this was that mankind created an artificial intelligence to protect us. Then eventually the AI realized that mankind is our own tool of destruction. So the AI decided what needed to happen was that people needed to die, right? I know it's a movie. I remember watching it and saying, ooh, the robots, they might come for us. And now, with all this technology, right, this artificial intelligence, I'm watching this, and I've also heard a few academicians in the US really start to query where we're going with this. We're creating something, and we can't fully understand where it's going. We've seen it happen with, for example, the theory of relativity. And, when Einstein studied it, everything was fine until Oppenheimer used it to create the nuclear bomb. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people are dead, and we have now the capacity as a human race to destroy ourselves.
True.
And now this is me, not as a minister, Paula, but you are a techie, and you are. I like to think you are a forward thinker. Sometimes I believe, I'm a bit more old school. I like a book. I listen to the radio. I use tech, but I barely use ChatGPT, and it took me a while just to figure that one out.
And did you enjoy it?
Yeah, but then sometimes it's also full of lies.
True.
Right? So one day, just for fun, I wrote, who is Sunny Nayombia? And if I did not know myself, it sounded like it made sense. But it was a lie. They said I'd written books. They said that I was a professor of communications. It was a bunch of, but it almost sounded real. And so I guess I want to hear what you think about this. When you smart people are in the labs and you're creating these things, don't you worry maybe you are perhaps creating the tools? Again, we've seen movies. There's another one, iRobot. Will Smith, where humans create robots. They're supposed to be our helpers. And then eventually one robot actually starts getting human emotion. Then it's a totally different thing. Because then if a robot has human emotion, does it have rights, right? Can you just destroy it? It's become another thing. The question is, do you guys think about these things? And how do you ensure that what you are creating will not be the thing that kills us all?
Before we continue this very interesting conversation, are you looking for a job, or is there a tender you want to bid for? On the New Times Job Mart, you will find hundreds of jobs and tender listings. Visit the Job Mart today by going to its website, jobs.newtimes.co.rw. If you want to post a job opportunity, call 07-8528-9489 and ask about the great rates. And now back to this show.
Their concerns, their worries about, yes, technology is very exciting, but then what do we not know that could end up being destructive for all of us? I think we find ourselves in times where also we can't afford to say, it's scary. We don't know if we're creating things that will kill us and wipe us off the earth, and so we just don't want to engage, because then that's not possible. We don't live as an island. Let's say for Rwanda, just to give an example, it's almost like saying, I know there will be accidents on the road, so I'm never going to be on the road because I don't want to die. I'll never drive a car, ride a bike, or walk on the road. I'll just stay in my house. And that's not possible. And I always say it's just that there's a lot of sophistication with these new and emerging technologies that make it even more complex in terms of the risks and concerns that come with it. But I believe even when cars were being created, everyone was like, what if you have drivers that don't just drive very well and then you're killing people? And so that's why you then have, traffic rules. That's why you have driving schools that then teach people how to drive and the rules and everything. And so you sort of provide, how do you regulate that industry? And so I think that's what we're also trying to do globally, anyone that is in the tech space trying to do that. And for me, again, it comes back to these concerns are real. We can't hide from them. But if we remain, let's say, for Rwanda as a country where we'll just consume what is coming from elsewhere, who has developed ChatGPT? We need to use it. Who has developed an AI model for healthcare? Let's take it on. Then these risks, whether we like it or not, will manifest, and probably in the worst ways possible. And that's why you see a very strong focus for us to say, while there's all these concerns, while we cannot afford to shy away from being part of what is going on globally, how do we build a muscle of being able to produce for ourselves what makes sense for us? So how do we move from simply just being consumers to being producers of this technology? Because if you wait until something is built somewhere in Silicon Valley or another tech hub, what then happens if it's built in a way where these concerns that you and I are talking about today, these concerns that everyone has in their mind, even as they are using ChatGPT and everything, and we're not thinking about that. Now, it doesn't mean that our own innovators are the ones that are better placed to think about it. But what I'm saying is that when we put in place the right, regulations and policies to support, then we're able to pay attention to these concerns that we see globally. How are we responding to them with our very own people building solutions in a way that we can manage and control to help in ensuring that we get the best out of it? You gave a perfect example of how you've used ChatGPT to ask who is Sunny. What ends up happening is that is a real concern actually with many of these generative AI tools, is that not everything is correct. And unfortunately, probably for the longest time, it will be difficult to find completely correct information. What happens is that the tools are scrapping data and information from almost anything that you can find that is online. So then it takes us back to say, what do we want online? Because the absence of making sure that we're putting the right information online means that it will only query and analyze false information and give you the false feedback that you're seeing. And so I think in the end, it's in a controlled way, are we able to build such models that we feed with the right information so that citizens are getting the right feedback? We were having conversations with Google because they've done their own ChatGPT solution called BART, and we're saying, can we work with you to create a similar tool with our local startups that we can use for citizen queries that come for anything they may want? Citizens always, either it's a permit that they can't get or there's a problem they have. There's so many queries, and we wanted to have this citizen engagement portal. And we're like, can we have our startups, but also get some of these big companies that are built tools, but we contextualize it to things where we're feeding the right information and citizens don't have to make a phone call or walk to an office to ask for information. They're able to query this and get all this information. These are some of the things that we're doing, and what it's calling for is that even for us as policymakers or regulators is the ability to be open and agile. Today I may be solving for a real risk that I can see, but tomorrow another unintended consequence will manifest. And so I need to be agile enough on how I can respond to that. And so even when we deploy these technologies, we want to be able to tell our citizens, yes, there are risks, yes, there are concerns, but part of what we're doing is how do we support responsible use, responsible creation of some of this technology, but not necessarily just instilling fear that people will just feel like they never want to use it. I was once asked, would you recommend ChatGPT being used in schools, or would you just say, as a government, ChatGPT should never be used? I said, actually, it's good. We should be able to open up our children to say, you can look at it and see what it gives you, but train them on, should you take everything that comes out of it as gospel truth? Absolutely not. What can it help you? Maybe it can help you in structuring an essay, for example, the flow. Maybe it can help you you build critical thinking skills that allow them to probe further and know that this information that has been put out to me because I queried or prompted something within the ChatGPT tool, how accurate is all of this? And so these are some of the things that we're going to have to do, as opposed to shying away and saying this thing is just too risky and we should just never attempt to do it.
I'm still worried about the robots that will come and finish us all. As a Luddite, that's something that I'm just like, oh goodness.
Yeah, it's a real concern. It's a real concern. And
because the worst part is you don't know what you don't know, right? So we're creating these things that might eventually become more I don't know. It's what they call
more
it, the
powerful.
Singularity.
Yes.
Where it becomes self-aware.
Yes.
And no one, and people say, yeah, it's not possible, but no one knows. At this point, we don't know how much capacity we're creating. We don't, I guess.
But would your worry stop you from even experimenting with them if you feel like they could create value?
I guess this is the thing. I would like for there to be an international understanding of what are the rules of engagement.
Exactly.
Yes, Rwanda is too small. We're not going to lead. So we have to figure out how to do things within the context that exists today. But if we go back to, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, if we had known then that using coal and this would, one, create untold wealth, but also create the climate change crisis that we are now facing as humanity, maybe we could have done things differently. And I guess that's the thing. Are you, as governments, having these discussions with the private sector, with these tech giants, with the Googles and the Facebooks, Meta, to kind of really discuss and understand that, it can't just be the engineers leading this.
Absolutely.
Right there.
No, I totally hear you. And these conversations are happening. These platforms are there. But I think let's also be frank and honest that what we've also seen increasingly was a heavy influence of the big tech companies on some of these global conversations that are happening. But what we are seeing, which is also a good trend, is that almost everyone is waking up and saying, wait a minute, the big tech companies are very powerful. Some of them maybe even be more powerful than governments.
100%.
And so now, because of that kind of realization, there's now a more coordinated effort that is happening across different parts of the world at the government level to say, what is it that we want? And how do we ensure that what is being said here, is something that we are very comfortable with? Needless to say that even as a continent, we need to come together and decide what we want. We've seen blocks like EU that have been very strong in coming together
Data protection
and really ensuring that this is how we want to see things happen. This is the level of transparency. This is what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. And the same has to happen for us as Africa as a continent. You rightly said, one single country is not going to be able to push back on this, on what we're seeing happening globally. We have the benefit that we have now Smart Africa that is bringing us together as 40 member states across the continent. We need everyone. We need all the 50 plus member states coming together and saying, what are the concerns about, robotics? What are the concerns about AI? What are the concerns, about, any emerging technology that we're seeing? And what is it that we want? And how do we ensure that all the big tech companies, the startups that are forming, because, some startups become unicorns in just a very short time, and eventually they become one of the big guys. How do we ensure that they know the rules of the game, the rules of engagement that we are going to undertake as a continent? And so it's work in progress. I'll not say that it's something that has already been figured out. It's work in progress, but at least the right conversations have started happening. We need to do more to give that level of comfort that citizens need to see, because it's truly scary.
Yeah. When I announced your presence on the podcast earlier this week, I announced it on social media. And so I asked people, my followers, to ask, to share their questions with me, the questions that I should ask you if given the opportunity. So is it okay if I ask you a few?
Please do.
Awesome. So the first question that I received, this one was from my Instagram, was what plans does, I guess, your ministry or government of Rwanda have to digitize our entire healthcare system to allow a seamless flow of patient information from physicians and doctors from, say, for example, someone gets sick, they've been treated in a Kibungo hospital, and so their entire file is there, and now they maybe they've decided to get treatment here at Faisal. So is there a system, say, for example, someone's in Faisal, and the doctors or people who are working there are able to access patient information from, say, their former healthcare providers? Do we have that kind of system that allows for that kind of seamless sharing of patient information?
So we have put in place a digital healthcare transformation roadmap. And what really it sought to do, one, we did like a landscape analysis of what are the issues within healthcare delivery, what are the pain points, mapping out the patient journey, looking at patient engagement, what do we need to do using digital technologies to empower the healthcare teams, how do we use technology to enable clinical and operational effectiveness, as well as really just transforming the entire healthcare continuum. Why was that important? Because once we mapped out the patient journey, then we're able to understand, is there an opportunity for us to use digital tools to support, this process? Now, you raise a very important point from the question, which is how do we ensure that a citizen has one record? Today, if you have a dentist, maybe a gynecologist, and then you have, a general practitioner, if you look at the records that each one has, maybe they're not even harmonized in the sense that the data sets that are in there are not similar across the board. And so the idea is that you have, as a citizen, as a patient, you have one record that then can be used across the different healthcare providers. And so some of the systems that we had already built, we had some electronic medical record systems at the health post level, at the hospital level, and the health centers. And what we're doing now is how do we harmonize them so that in the end, me as a citizen, me as a patient, I only have one record, but also I have control over it, and I decide who gets access to it, because that's how we're seeing, the benefits of some of these digital healthcare solutions that we have. So basically, all the way from the information that the health worker has to the health post, to the health center, to a hospital, and eventually to the private hospitals, just making sure that there's a single patient record that can be referenced. It's very important. It not only reduces for any touch point in the healthcare system where you would have to go, you would find yourself doing almost the same tests. Maybe they want to know your blood group just because they don't have one unified record. And so that's why our work has been around how do we start to centralize it, and systems are being built today which would allow for that to happen. And so our target is that at least in the next 3 years to have such a system in place that allows for that to happen. Well, so there's the integration that has to happen with the current systems that we have. the standards, because we've had multiple systems that had already been built over the last years. So once you integrate them and then providing, linking them to, recently talked about the digital ID that we want to provide to citizens, so that becomes one of the use cases on how you can access information, but also allow others to access it. And so it's all the work that has to go into integrating all these siloed data platforms that were already existing, and also harmonizing them, because sometimes the way information is recorded in one system is different from the other. And so after doing that kind of assessment, we realized how much work it's going to take. Obviously, if we can do it faster, we work with
Using
our teams
AI?
to see. Of course, AI has to be used, and this is where it becomes very efficient, because then you're able to detect, what are some of the overlaps in information, but also even when you provide, if there's any fraud across the board in how you access healthcare services, can that also be done? So there's different ways we can use that. And so that is one that we're doing, and even just building that interoperability layer without being too technical, that allows for health information exchange between healthcare providers, whether it's public or private providers. And so there is work that is being done already to ensure that we can enable that kind of what that is happening within the healthcare system. And to do that, it's one of our priority sectors, but it also means that there is what we can do on the patient side. The heavy lifting of investments and digitalization is happening on the healthcare side, because it's one thing to make it easy for patients to come in and book an appointment and see the doctor at the time that they booked and be out of the hospital. One of the examples we've been going through is you go to King Faisal Hospital, maybe you spend 3 hours there. Out of the 3 hours, the time you spend with the doctor is less than 30 minutes. So what are the other 2.5 hours? You're running around in the different administrative processes and now building systems that are able to talk to each other, but also to enable that if you go in, the time you spend with the doctor should be the longest time you spend in the hospital, and the rest should almost already be automated and make it easy for that. So there's those different pain points that we had to better understand, look at the systems that exist, understand which ones have to be overhauled, and then build, one system that would really respond to integrating these multiple efforts that have been undergoing. We'll probably see results sooner than the 3 years. 3 years is when you have the full comprehensive system that we are looking to build. But there are things that we want to start delivering sooner, like what is the patient experience? Can this be done sooner? When some of the feedback we've been receiving when patients go to hospitals is the payment process is just too cumbersome. That can be solved easily. It doesn't have to wait for the bigger comprehensive system to be in place. And so within the next 1 year, we're going to start to see some improvements, at least on the patient-facing roles and interfaces, as we continue to build the back-end systems that would then create those efficiencies that we would need to see in the health sector.
So talking about back-end technologies, the second question is about blockchain technology. Does blockchain technology have a place in Africa? And if so, what sectors would it serve best?
It does, very much. And I think we see so many use cases, and I'll probably focus on what we're seeing in Rwanda. We did a pilot with the National Land Center, which was around making sure that we have this blockchain distributed ledger infrastructure that supports the land transactions that happen. The beauty about blockchain technology is the level of security it provides, especially for sensitive data, in ensuring that it's untampered, but even when it is, there's transparency and visibility on how that has been done. So things like land records, how land is such a big asset for most people, then becomes a very good example of where we are able to use, blockchain technology, because then what you eliminate is aspects of fraud, where if I'm going to 2 separate financial institutions and putting my land as a collateral for, whatever services I want to access, then you're not using the same piece of land for different financial institutions and creating, all these loopholes for fraud to happen. And so I think starting with that, you can see that. Then the second one we are seeing a lot of potential, but also actual examples, is in the healthcare industry. Back to the conversation we're having around having one medical record and ensuring that it's untampered, who has accessed this information, and being able to really provide that level of security when using using blockchain technology, and the other one is in financial services. So there's lots of potential for that. What we need to start seeing is the scaled wide adoption that you can start to see. When as a citizen you get a service, sometimes you don't know or don't care whether it's AI in the background or blockchain, also some sensors that are happening, but sometimes those efficiencies that come with enabling the quality of service or the efficiency of the service you're receiving can only be enabled by these kind of technologies that we are discussing today.
Talking about some of these technologies, again, there's also cloud computing. Someone actually asked me, so with the new data protection law coming into action, what are our plans to bring competent and well-known cloud computing services to Rwanda to keep our companies competitive?
With the data protection, you recall part of what we discussed earlier was, even as we think about AI, one of the things that we need to do is having robust cloud computing infrastructure or computing infrastructure that is needed for that, not necessarily cloud. But to your point, even as we have been creating awareness, sensitizing, whether it's service providers, institutions, corporates on the data protection law and how and what they need to do to comply, we've also had a parallel effort bringing on board cloud computing providers. And the case in point is Oracle. We've already agreed with them. They're going to be setting up their cloud computing infrastructure here in the regional data center here in Rwanda. They will start works in December, and we have a timeline building out the data center. They've already identified space within the Kigali Innovation City with the land where they're going to start building. And so we're working with a 12 to 18 month timeline. This is for the physical infrastructure. However, we've asked them that without waiting for the actual data center to be built in Rwanda, we can start tapping into some of their cloud infrastructure that they have already in place. And so that should be activated by June 2024. Where now, whether it's startups, government institutions, corporate companies, they can access this kind of facility. Now, the idea is that we can even have more because that drives competition, but having a household name like Oracle is already a good thing for the tech ambitions that Rwanda has. But the idea is that we could get even more of them that are considering Rwanda as a place that they want to do business.
Yeah, I would like to ask about one of the funds that I think Rwandans were very, very excited about, which is the Rwanda Innovation Fund.
Yes.
Among its stated goals is to support, 150 companies with, I guess, a third being Rwandan, a third being regional, and I guess a third being African. And creating about 2,000 direct jobs. And if I'm not mistaken, those who are awarded these funds, they're supposed to get between $250,000 to up to $2 million. Has this money been dispersed to any companies, especially Rwandan companies? And in terms of the jobs that's been created, have you come close to the 2,000 direct jobs that the fund was supposed to create?
So let's start with the fund and itself and what it's supposed to do. The fund was designed to provide what we call growth stage financing, and that's why you caught the $500,000 dollars envelope, because what it does is when you look at the life of tech companies or startups, you have early stage where you need the form of financing that is mostly in grants. Then you have startup capital that can be a combination of grants but also equity type of investments. And then you have this growth stage financing. At this point, you've already done a proof of concept. You already have a product that is going to the market. You already have a potential target market group. And so it's really about scaling to the other market. So to do that, to a broader market, to do that, it requires that you also, at the very initial stages of ideation to early stages, you already have like some very good support structures that create a good pipeline that can benefit from this stage financing. And usually it's highly competitive. I think some of the feedback I remember, because it took a while to take off, some of the feedback we would get, the innovators would come to us and say, we don't see people interested in funding us. Rwanda Innovation Fund, has very high requirements. The fund managers of Rwanda Innovation Fund are like, we don't see investable companies. And and that's why we had to go back to the drawing board and figure out how do we create the pipeline that can then benefit from this financing. Now, as you rightly said, when we put it in place with the support of the African Development Bank, the idea was that it becomes a fund that can support more than just Rwandan startups. It can support startups from across the region and also on the continent, and probably even them considering having a home here in Rwanda. So to date, we have about 8 companies that have been supported, and out of the 8, one is Rwandan, Eden Care. They're in digital insurance. So you have one that is in EdTech, actually 2 companies that are already providing educational technology type of solutions. You have one in healthcare, 3 actually in healthcare, and also in the mobility space. So we have 8 companies so far from across the continent. One of them is Rwandan, and I know one of the feedback that we've gotten has been around how do we get more Rwandan startups that can benefit from this fund. And people have been asking if it's a Rwanda Innovation Fund, where you're then supporting companies from Nigeria, and everyone will say, first of all, Rwanda has positioned itself as a Pan-African hub for innovation. That's why when you walk into most of our innovation hubs, you don't just only find Rwandans, but also the idea is that we're opening up to many, but we're putting in a lot of emphasis to figure out how can we make sure that Rwandan-led, Rwandan-owned startups are also eligible for this kind of funding that we're providing. And that's why you see also some bridge financing that comes in to support mostly these. That's how we launched the Hunger Pitch Fest. The idea, while it's super early stage, it's ideation level, it's still important because then we're able to create, that excitement around innovators even getting as low as $25,000. But then it's more than just the money. It's the hand-holding, the business development, the putting a product on the market that helps to getting there. So that's where we are with that. Now, obviously, even for us working with the fund manager, there's a push to say we need to see more investments. Give us a list of all the Rwandan startups that you've been considering. What is it? Where do you feel that there are gaps? Because that's where we feel as a government, we can step in to say, okay, if we have 10 or 20 Rwandan startups that are in the list of companies that could be eligible, where can we support them better so that they have a better chance of accessing this kind of financing? Now, usually the way the funds are I will just give you a ballpark figure, because with such funding, startups don't like to disclose how much they're getting. So I can give you roughly how much has been been given to them. But so for all the 18, we have a total of about $17 million that has been disbursed to these 8 companies. And so because of the process of disbursement, sometimes the announcement is made when they've already closed on some of these financing requirements that they have. But the fund was designed to be $100 million fund, and out of that, $16 million have already been disbursed. We still have a couple of years to go. The idea is that we can even curate more funding. The reality, Sunny, is that one fund is not enough, right? We need to have more of the angel investors. We need to have more of these funds that are privately managed and led. We have some of them that are already coming into our market, like Catapult, that is now even based in Noshken, and they're able to, they become part of the ecosystem because they need to understand how these businesses are shaping their ideas and how they're building their teams to deliver a product that is definitely going to scale on the market. But we'll need more than the 5 or 6 that we have. And this is where to bridge, this is why KFC, it's very important that it was created when it was created, because KFC has then become our natural partner in attracting this kind of fund managers
KFC,
in Rwanda.
That is the Kigali
International Financial Center.
Okay.
So they're very crucial in this journey of helping us to create the right environment that brings in place more fund managers, which means then we're able to target and reach more startups. But to do that, you still need people like what we call the enterprise support organizations that come in to handhold startups and ensure that level of preparedness that allows them to be eligible.
Is the money that's being handed, you've said that there's some money from the African Development Bank. Is it also from the Rwandan taxpayers? And if so, and if not, that's question number 1. Number 2 is, are they grants, or they're like a almost concessional loans, and eventually they'll either pay it back with a small interest? Is it like a financial transaction?
It is a financial transaction. And to go back to your first point, so we wanted to create a fund of $100 million. We went out to look for different fund managers that could just come and establish here. Establish and bring their money. A lot of the feedback that we got is most companies were asking, can you match dollar for dollar investment for what we are putting in. And in discussion with one of these fund managers, which is Angaza, which is the one that is managing the Rwanda Innovation Fund, they say, look here, we can raise $70 million, but we want government to raise $30 million to match the 70 and have a total of $100 million. So what government did is to work with the African Development Bank, because the African Development Bank was also thinking about which hotspots on the continent they can create innovation funds. So we had a conversation with them to say, we know you're interested in setting up innovation funds. We have fund managers that are interested in coming in Rwanda, but need the government of Rwanda to match what is being given. And so that's how African Development Bank was able to put in the $30 million through Rwanda, and the Angaza bringing the $70 million. But one of the conditions, because Africa Development Bank is not going to set up these kind of funds almost in every country, was to say, let's make sure it's a fund that is able to support innovators across the continent.
So last question. This one I got it from TikTok. So I think it was from a young person who's maybe just finished school or is starting to think of entering the entrepreneurial space. They asked, what would the minister tell a young person who wants to be a tech entrepreneur but doesn't have capital? How do they move? That's the first question. Secondly, Rwanda, unlike, say, for example, the US, we don't have a culture of treating failure as just a learning opportunity and, allowing for failure to then catapult us into success. Usually when you fail, you shut up shop and you cannot ever get funding ever again. Yet we also know that the tech space is it's built off of failure, but failing upwards, I guess we can call it failing upwards. So as a Rwandan entrepreneur, a young Rwandan tech entrepreneur, how would you advise someone to overcome failure as a startup, especially in our space?
Thanks, Sunny. Maybe if you allow me, I want to go back. I realized, because I took notes when you're asking a question, I realized I didn't fully answer it. On the Rwanda Innovation Fund, you did mention, I think you were asking whether it's grants or concessional loans. It's mostly equity. It's equity type of investments that the fund will make into these businesses. And that's why many times we're not going to disclose this is how much has been put in this company. It's up to the startup to disclose because depending on also how much stake they've given up to get that kind of equity investment. But that's really the main form of investment that is coming from Rwanda Innovation Fund into these companies. Now, back to this, it's a very interesting question, but I must say, what do you tell a young Rwandan startup or entrepreneur, innovator that doesn't have capital? I would say it starts with having an idea, right? Most people like to say, when you're starting out as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, your sources of funds are either from friends and family. They always add the full bit of people who can just believe in you for the sake of believing. Because they like you. Because they like you or something. Or if you can do a good pitch and they're not able to see through what the risks are, they'll still fund. But that's typically how most startups in the very early stages are able to fund. Now, we may not have that kind of network to say, even most of our startups in Rwanda, in Africa, are mostly young people. Young people are probably still staying with their families. And sometimes those families may not even have that kind of capital to put to them, or even a network of friends that could just believe in their idea and give it to them. And that's why, for our very unique situation, it requires that as a government, we step up, but what we are also encouraging more and more is how do we get even the more established businesses? They don't have to be in the tech space, like business people that have really made it in their entrepreneurial journey, to take a bet on some of these younger, startups and innovators coming up. What we're doing as government, and you will see it in the soon to be launched Startup Act, is to put in place a startup fund. Very different from what we have with Rwanda Innovation Fund, which is mostly on growth financing, but rather the startup fund should be purely grant type of financing. And this is the part where you say, I'm going to invest in 1,000 companies, maybe 10 will make it, and I'll be comfortable with it, because those 10 that will make it, the impact they'll create on the economy in terms of jobs created, but also solutions that are put into the market, will be much more than what I invested in 1,000 companies. Will we have enough funds? Maybe not in the beginning, but the more we'll start to see successful startups that are coming out of and this is why the startup bill is being designed the way it is, it's the idea that we will have a 7-year hand-holding journey of making sure startups don't go through the valley of death and just die there because there's no way of like going to the next level because they lack, market access, they lack the regulatory instruments to allow them to test and prove their concepts, they lack the initial startup funding to do that, but just really structuring all these types of supports and incentives around allowing them to get to that next level, because what we are seeing is that sometimes 50% more than that even die before they can get to a point where they have a product that is getting onto the market. So our unique case requires for intentionally supporting and walking the journey with them, but we must do it carefully in such a way that we're also not creating a dependence mindset where they feel like if government is not doing this for me, then I'm not going to do anything, but rather just enough support that encourages innovation and creativity to really happen. Now, I would say whether you have capital or not, we have different initiatives that are putting out, whether it's Hunger Pitch Fest, we have Vestvel, we have Noshken, we have the CC Hub, different platforms that are there that are just there to allow even people with just ideas to come together and meet groups of mentors that can support them with that. And then on the side of financing, I think as the resources become available, we can continue to support. But young innovators should not refuse to work on their big ideas just because they don't have visibility of where the money is coming, but rather they should just start working on them, because sometimes opportunity will knock at different times, and at least those opportunities must find you ready with something. Now, the question about failure is a very big one, and I think in a way even us as policymakers, we are to blame because of the way we are more comfortable with tested and tried solutions. One of the reasons we had to sit down with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Procurement Authority, RDB, to discuss how can we ensure that a certain percentage of our budget, especially for tech solutions, is going to startups, because government is the biggest buyer of these solutions. But when we go out to write our tender documents or our request for proposals, or we're asking people for experience and proof where they've deployed or done, built a similar solution. Whether we like it or not, such a requirement automatically disqualifies any young person that is passionate about building a solution for healthcare, even if they have never done it anywhere. So we realized that even in a way, the way some of our processes were designed, even if intentionally we were not, working to limit startups from taking a piece of the pie, but just the way we designed them, that was the outcome. That was the end result, that every time we put out anything that we're tendering for, they just never have a level playing field like already established companies that are already there. So we went through about 6 months of work with the Rwanda Procurement Authority, trying to say, we need to be open enough to procure a solution. Can I just tender a problem? Can I just say, I want to find a solution that helps with weather forecasting? Whether one startup uses AI models and another one uses IoT sensors, it doesn't matter. We do it as a design challenge, as a design concept. And actually today, when you look at the procurement law, you will see that we have introduced this new way of procuring, which is called a design contest, because then I'm not going to look for a ready solution. I'm just going to look for someone who's willing to work with us. We're just saying this is the problem we're trying to solve for. It doesn't matter what technology. We don't want to be descriptive of the technologies you could use to respond to that challenge, but just to see the amount of innovators that can step up and take up that challenge. And so we've started with that, and we're hoping that in itself, after 3 years of experimenting with it, we can start to see the results, and then maybe even other sectors across the economy can also open up to this kind of ideas where you give an opportunity to startups that do not necessarily. If we always look for tested and tried solutions, they'll never have a space, they'll never grow, and it's really one of the instruments we're looking at. I would say failure is inevitable. It's the reality. Even us, by the way, sometimes we create policies, and when the policy fails to create the desired impact, the backlash that comes with it versus what have I learned out of this process to improve what already exists tells you that as a society, maybe there's a level of perfection that we all want to have in everything that we do.
Or maybe we just feel like, we don't really have the resources to fail.
That's what I was going to come in. So there's also that, because if I'm using taxpayers' money, how much what percentage of it do I want to put out in such a way that it will fail, right? And that's why I think there's always that balance between, don't set out to fail. Absolutely. That's not even something that we're discussing, I guess, on this forum. But at least if you make good enough enough effort to show that you tried to think through all the possible outcomes and ways of doing something, except that maybe the outcome became different, then I think there's room, that room for failure we've already put in place. What may be difficult is where people just say, I'll do something. If it works, it's okay. If it doesn't, it won't. Then there's no room for that because the resources to do just that are just not there. And so for us, it's always a balance between you can fail, it's possible, and we can accommodate it, but we must be able to show for everything possible that was done to ensure that this outcome doesn't come out. Because sometimes we design projects and you can already see from the get-go they're going to fail because that level of detail and thinking through hasn't been put in place. And that's not something we want to encourage, because in the end, if you do that, we're going to incur more losses than the benefits of learning, if there's even any learning that's going to happen. Because if people just wake up and like, I'll just do it whether it works and it doesn't matter, then they're probably also not learning. So I would say it's really that delicate balance between, can we think through things end to end? Can we coordinate better to ensure that at least we get the most out of what we are trying to do? And if there's failure, are we able to document what the failures are? Because I think also the other challenge we have is that we never document these failures. And for startups particularly, even if you failed to build a healthcare solution, what technology did you use that can be used for agriculture, that can be used to solve a financial inclusion problem? It shouldn't stop at, it didn't work for healthcare, it will never work for anything else. And that's what we are constantly asking startups and even pushing them further. I'll just end on this note. Many of our startups will build solutions for the healthcare industry. But then you sit and say, in the end, it's one hospital that you're all targeting. Does that one hospital or that one patient have the luxury to have 10 apps on their device? Absolutely not. Is there a way we can even consolidate some of these things? And that's why even for most startups, as you're building, you must be thinking about an exit strategy. Can I build something that can be a module for another bigger solution so that in the end, if it's the farmer who we were saying earlier doesn't have the digital literacy, we're not throwing at him 10 different things and he just doesn't know which one is going to give him the best outcome, but we're finding a very organized way of ensuring that at least there's that consolidation that is happening. Obviously, that requires that us as policymakers, we're doing that hand-holding so that in the end, you have 10 startups benefiting from providing a solution to a farmer, but you don't have a farmer worrying about which of the 10 solutions is the best solution for them, at least for now, as we build the digital literacy skills, especially if the solutions are the same.
Yeah. Before we end, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you have any questions, or do you have a question that you wish I had asked you?
That's an interesting one. A couple of things. One is what's happening with 4G. It's a question that we keep hearing from many people. You had the Korea Telecom network. What does this mean? Can you give confidence for the other companies that want to come and invest in Rwanda, that they can have that level of regulatory certainty as they invest?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, they had a monopoly on 4G for the longest time, right?
Yes.
But now, I guess...
we removed the exclusivity.
Okay. All right. So now I've seen Airtel and
MTN here.
What next?
So what next? Maybe let's give even a bit of background. For Rwanda, we're always trying to minimize the catch-up gap that has to happen when it comes to some of the global technological advancements. And so when we entered into a partnership with Korea Telecom to build the 4G network, we were among the very first countries. And we are very grateful for the partnership and really the trust that Korea Telecom had to partner with Rwanda, because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be where we are even in terms of 4G infrastructure rollout across the country. So it was such a necessary investment that was made, one that we can only be able to, see the benefits for right now that we have today. But over time, the challenge that happened was that beyond coverage, and you always hear the differences or the connections that are being made between the coverage gap and the usage gap. Coverage gap means, do you have infrastructure in almost every part of Rwanda? Usage gap means how many citizens are benefiting from that infrastructure directly. And so that's why I said earlier, with Rwanda, there's been heavy investments in closing the coverage gap, but the more we close the coverage gap, the more the usage gap widens, because we still have lots and lots of people and households that are living in areas that are covered but still not able to use it. So what we saw as a trend was that even for the 4G subscribers, the numbers were going down. Ideally, when you make an investment, you want the numbers to go up, right, in terms of adoption. It also means that if numbers are going down for 4G, then it also means that maybe they will never be, in the immediate future, may be difficult to justify a 5G investment. Because you're like, if I'm not using even 4G, what are the chances that I'll have use cases of people that are using 5G? And there were a couple of challenges that really were stemming from different, stakeholders involved. From the cost, is the wholesale cost high? Is the retail price higher? What does this mean? And so we had to have, conversation with both KTRN and the two main operators, who are Airtel and MTN, on how do we unlock adoption? How do we have more 4G subscribers? Where are the issues? Where are the challenges? We talked about multiple models, and in the end, it boiled down with, 2-3 year conversation to saying, you know what, let's open up. But in opening up, for us as a government, we still want KTRN to stay on the market in whatever form they would wish, either as a third operator, in addition to MTN and Airtel, or any form. And so today we are in the process of negotiating. What does staying on the market look like? What else do we need to do as government to give them confidence to stay on the market? And so hopefully be able to share the details of the outcomes of the negotiations that are going on. But it's been a question that always comes up on what next, but also to give certainty that we don't wake up and just put in place partners and then we close partnerships, but it's part of a conversation. It's part of unlocking the market as it is, but it's also part of ensuring that there's healthy competition on the market. The other thing that I think we keep hearing is the digital ID. There is excitement, there is concerns, there's fear. What is the digital ID about? What does it mean? And I think the exciting bit for us is beyond Rwanda going down the road of ensuring that every citizen has a digital ID, because identification is the very first form of ensuring that you can deliver better services to citizens. And we will start very soon with what we call the pre-enrollment phase of enrolling citizens, getting their biometrics. With the current ID that we had, that it was only given to people who are 16 years and above. With the digital ID, we're going to be providing it from birth. And so that's one exciting aspect of the digital ID. The second thing is that with the biometrics that we were providing, people would just use their thumbs in terms of biometrics for and eye facials for verification or authentication. And today we are introducing more biometric aspects, including 10 fingerprints and all of that. And so even for a child that is born, they'll have like 3 different touch points where their biometrics are updated, because again, the biometrics technology is also evolving over time. But the exciting bit is that we can now provide IDs to children from birth, and we're able to support with all the services that they need. The other exciting bit is that beyond just citizens, we used to have IDs for citizens and foreigners, but there were categories that were never served, of people we call stateless people. They're not citizens, but they're also not foreigners. In the form that they came into the country, there's always unique cases and circumstances. But for us, they need to have an ID, because the ID is the single form of accessing any service, and we want to make sure these services are accessible to anyone. The other exciting bit, which is where you see there's a strong drive on smartphone adoption, is that then you don't need to even carry a physical card, because the digital ID will come in 3 forms. It can either be a physical card if you really want to have one. Most likely, most people want to have a physical card because it gives them the safety and assurance they have it. They don't want their phone to die out and everything. But you also have the option of having a mobile ID or a token, which then makes it easy. If you're in Irembo, you don't have to punch in your numbers. It's already well integrated. And so these become different ways that become very exciting for why we need a digital ID. And so we will be capturing biometrics very soon. We will be doing the pre-enrollment. But it's very exciting now, because every time parents would ask, how can I get an ID for my child who's not yet 16? And here's an opportunity to do exactly that.
Thank you so much, Minister Paula, for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me.
Did you enjoy the conversation?
I loved it.
All right. So to all other ministers, karibu sana. We'll be excited to host you. And to everyone else, have a great week. Goodbye.
Before we leave, would you like to partner with the long form? Send an email to sales@newtimesrwanda.com and ask for our rates. If you enjoy this show, subscribe to the long form with Sunny Nayombia on your favorite podcast service. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, and Amazon Music, as well as the New Times website. Until next week, goodbye.